Okay, let's get started. Um, can we advance to the next slide, please? Good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. I know that there are a lot of things that compete for your time and your attention. So your interest in the city's water, wastewater, stormwater master plans, and the strategic transportation network review is appreciated. And your interest in the ongoing vibrancy and success of the community and Hamilton as a whole is even more appreciated. For those of you whom I have not met, my name is Omar Shams. I am the project manager of transportation planning with the city of Hamilton. It's my pleasure this evening to serve as the facilitator for this session and as the lead for the strategic transportation network review for the city of Hamilton. My role as the facilitator for this session is to help achieve the objective of this meeting and facilitate a meaningful two-way communication between the project team and all of you in attendance, without whom the meeting would not make much more sense. This session is mainly about introducing the two strategic studies and providing an opportunity to participate in these master planning processes. So we will also outline a range of opportunities outside of this session that are available to you for providing comments and ideas. The opportunity to share ideas and thoughts certainly extends beyond this one meeting, which are just a couple of hours at most, or a little more than that. The city and the consultants definitely understand the importance of hearing different points of views and harnessing the best ideas from whomever and wherever they come. I will also note that some people send questions in advance of the meeting. I would like to thank them for doing so. Our speakers will address many of them during the presentation or again toward the end of this meeting. Next slide, please. As a heads up, towards the latter part of this session, we will be inviting questions and comments from those of you who are participating. But right now, I want to describe how we can do that. So you have a little bit of a heads up once we get to that point. I know that some of you are experts in using Microsoft Teams and even other platforms. But for some, this might be the first time. So just bear with me while I go through some of those few details on how to make them comfortable using this platform. At first, I want to mention to everybody that this session is being recorded, and it's being recorded with a view to have a record of the proceedings and also to make at least the presentation component available to those who were not able to attend this evening's session. And in order to avoid cross-talkings and to keep the process more manageable, the Microsoft team has been configured so whoever wants to ask a question or share comments, they can signal the team by using the raise your hand feature. And for those of you who are unfamiliar on how to do this, let me explain what different options exist there. Anyone who have joined us through this meeting through internet browser or MS Teams application on your computer, you can click the raise hand icon on the top of your screen and you will be placed on a queue for asking questions. And the team will select at the end of this session during the Q&A segment the participants who has raised their hands and announce their screen names. And we will invite you to unmute yourself and briefly ask your questions or share your comments. And once you ask your question, we kindly ask you to remute yourselves and the team member will provide those and address your comments and questions. Anyone who has joined us through MS Team mobile application, you can see there is a 3-dot at the bottom of your screen. You can select the raise hand option from that pop-up by clicking those 3 dots. After you finish speaking and asking your question, please remember to lower your hand after that. You can also send questions to the team via Q&A feature on Microsoft Teams. In the latter part of this event, which will be a live Q&A session, I will read the questions and request a team member to address them. We will try to get to as many people and as many questions as possible within the window of this meeting, and we ask that you keep your questions as concise as possible and related to the topics being discussed tonight. To mention questions about specific property impacts or specific project impacts will not be discussed at this meeting. Those are best addressed through other forms of communication with the city's project teams. Tonight, I am joined by a number of project team members from both studies, including the city staff, consultants, and a number of panelists. There are many in number, so I won't mention them all, but I will ask them to briefly introduce themselves before they present slides or address any questions, mainly their names, their role with this project, and so on. Next slide, please. The layout of tonight's meeting is we're obviously on the opening remarks right now, and I will shortly after share a respectful land acknowledgement. We will then invite Charlie Tommen, the city's program lead for policy planning and municipal comprehensive review. Charlie will provide a high-level overview of the growth for the city of Hamilton and lay out the planning context for us. We then invite Mark Zomaik from a firm called GM Blue Plan to share an overview of water, wastewater, and stormwater master plans, including the study process, objectives, project timelines, next steps, and how you can participate throughout this master plan. Our last presenter would be David Powell from Arcadis IBI Group. He will be sharing an overview of his strategic transportation network review and discuss a number of topics, including but not limited to introduction to the development charges and how outcomes of the strategic transportation network review will be used as an input into the development charges bylaw update. He will bring us up to speed on the project evaluation process, discuss the evaluation criteria, the next steps, and how to participate and be part of that planning process with the city throughout the duration of the study. At the end of the presentation segment, we will be inviting questions of both facts and clarifications and any brief comments or observations that you attendees and participants would like to share with us. Next slide, please. Let's acknowledge that the city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Built Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resource around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792, between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. To date, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, North America, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our role as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. With that, I would like to invite Charlie Tommen to give us an overview of the growth planning and the planning initiatives that the city has been undertaking. Charlie, to you.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Omar. Good evening. My name is Charlie Tommen. I'm the program lead for policy planning and municipal comprehensive review within the sustainable community section of the planning division. And I'm just going to provide a couple of slides on Hamilton's projected population growth and land needs to the year 2051. So first, looking at the broader planning context within Ontario and the city of Hamilton. So the province of Ontario has adopted a place to grow growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe that provides land use and growth implementation policies that sets out how the city of Hamilton plans for its future growth. And then based on that planning framework under the growth plan, the city established the growth-related integrated development strategy, or GRIDS as it's referred, and this is a strategy that he he evaluates the land use, infrastructure, economic development, and financial implications of growth for the next 30 years. Through the most recent grids process for 2051, the city is planning for approximately 236,000 new residents and 122,000 new jobs within the city of Hamilton. Next slide. So the city of Hamilton is growing very, very fast over the next 30 years, and you know, based on the growth plan with which sets out minimum amounts of growth which sets out the minimum amount of growth that has to happen through intensification, meaning increasing the number of jobs and dwellings within the existing urban area. It sets out two numbers essentially. So for under the growth plan, a minimum of 50% of Hamilton's population growth has to happen through intensification. And then the other place where that growth happens is through the establishment of new greenfield areas, which the growth plan states must be developed at a density of 70 jobs and people per hectare. Next slide. So through the grids process, council chose to exceed the minimum intensification targets in the growth plan and adopted an official plan amendment for a no urban boundary expansion growth or approach to future growth planning, meaning that all future population and employment growth would be accommodated within the existing urban area. So that decision then went to the province, which overruled it and made changes to the official plan amendment and added 2,202 gross hectares of new land to the city's urban boundary. And as is shown in this map, these lands are located around 20 Road West, 20 Road East, Garner Road East, the Elfrida area, and the White Church Road area. So they're the hatched, I call it a salmon color, along the southern border of the proper old city of Hamilton, shown there. So as a part of the official plan amendment approved by the province, there is policy that states that no new development can occur on these lands until the city approves new secondary plans, or as they're referred to, neighborhood plans, for these new neighborhoods. And right now, city staff are engaging with the public to get their input for what the city's land use priorities should be for these new urban expansion lands, as well as establishing a framework for how the planning of these lands should occur. And that concludes my slides, and I'll be around if there's any more questions, but I'll turn it back to Omar. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Thanks for all the great work that you do for the city and for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with all of us, and setting up a planning context for the two master plan studies that are the main focus of tonight's PIC. Now I would like to invite Mark Mike from GM Blue Plan to provide an overview of the water, wastewater, and stormwater master plan study. Mark, to you.
Thank you, Omar. We go into our first slide here on the water, wastewater, and stormwater. Thanks. As shown on the screen here is the Municipal Engineers Association Class EA process flow chart. So these master plan projects are following the MEA Class EA process, which is a decision-making process that all Ontario municipalities must follow for building new infrastructure. So this figure shows the process along with all the various steps, decision points, and points of public contact. The master plans that we're talking about today are currently at the end of phase 1, depicted by the red box and the big "We Are Here" banner. We're about to commence phase 2, with the master plans concluding at the end of phase 2. Phase 3, 4, and 5, as shown on the figure, are typically undertaken for standalone class environmental assessments. These master plans themselves will become the basis for and used in support of the future Schedule B and C MCEA studies identified in the master plan. The next slide, please. And one of the first steps in the Class EA process and as part of the master plans is the definition of a problem or opportunity statement. This is the starting point, and it helps us define the scope and goals of our overall projects. As shown on the screen, the problem or opportunity statement for the City of Hamilton's water, wastewater, stormwater master plans is defined as supporting growth. The master plans will determine how the city's water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure will support growth in a sustainable and financially responsible manner, and development of a long-term servicing strategy. So these master plans will develop a long-term servicing strategy and capital forecast to ensure the level of service for existing residents and businesses to support future growth in the community through 2041 and to consider potential impacts post-2041. Additionally, on the right-hand side, the figure is depicting a simplified graphic of that Class EA process that we saw on the previous slide, but focusing on when we'll be planning on consulting the public. So in the box there, we're at PIC 1 during phase 1. We'll be going back to the public again, conclusion of phase 2 with the alternative solutions, and then finally again with a notice of completion for the master plan reports. Go to the next slide, please. The figure on this slide, so we're starting with the existing infrastructure. The figure on the left is showing the existing lake-based water system, and I'll give a little bit of a background on how those water systems works. First is the treatment, where water is drawn from Lake Ontario and treated at the Woodward Avenue Water Treatment Plant, shown by the small blue pentagon there, just at the shore of Lake Ontario. Pumping and transmission, so treated water is pumped from the treatment plant through the network of large diameter feeder mains, shown as the dark blue lines, all throughout the city. The city is divided up into several different pressure districts, generally based on land topography. Water is pumped by these pumping stations throughout the city in order to provide suitable pressure throughout each pressure district. Water is also stored at a series of in-ground reservoirs and above-ground elevated tanks, and they provide storage for fire emergency and more efficient system operation. The next slide, please. The first step within the master plan is reviewing the existing system and identifying many of the potential constraints and opportunities in order to service existing residents and businesses, as well as future growth, but while maintaining that existing level of service. On the treatment side, the Woodward Avenue Water Treatment Plant provides the treated water and has had relatively recent upgrades to support the growth. On the pumping and transmission side, there's been recently constructed infrastructure within or throughout several of the different pressure districts that can support future growth if needed, but further extensions of the trunk water mains, as well as new and upgrade pumping stations may be required depending on the location and scale of growth throughout the city. Identified in item number 4, or the call-out number 4, is a significant intensification potential within the downtown core and along the future LRT corridor. That's going to need potential upgrades to maintain level of service and to meet the growth, as well as to provide adequate pressure and fire flow for this redevelopment. Identified in item number 5 is the growth potential within the pressure district number 7, which is in the Upper Stony Creek area, may require new water facilities and system upgrades in order to meet growth. And on storage side, there are potential storage upgrades required within a few of the different pressure districts in the south of Hamilton. Go to the next slide then, please. Moving on to the existing wastewater system, similarly to how we showed water, we're showing here the existing wastewater system. And that's shown on here. The City of Hamilton's system is divided up into 2 major different service areas being combined, which is generally located in the older areas of the city in the downtown core, where stormwater and wastewater from homes and businesses flow through a single combined pipe, or a common pipe called a combined sewer. And then there are separated areas which are generally located in the outskirts or the surrounding municipalities, Waterdown, Stony Creek, Dundas, and Castor, and where wastewater and stormwater are conveyed through two different or separated sewers. For treatment and conveyance, the sewers that flow throughout the city, they ultimately outlet to one of the two wastewater treatment plants, Dundas Wastewater Treatment Plant located on the west side, and Woodward Wastewater Treatment Plant located near Hamilton Harbor. They where the wastewater is treated, and the effluents discharged to the Desjardins Canal for the Dundas plant, and to the Hamilton Harbor for the Woodward Ave wastewater treatment plant. The city has several sewage pumping stations located throughout the city at areas of low points where sewage needs to be pumped up to the gravity network. And there are several combined sewer overflows, or CSOs, tanks and outlets throughout the city that help to protect against sewer surcharging during severe wet weather events. To our next slide, please. For existing wastewater system opportunities and constraints, on the treatment side with the Woodward Ave treatment, there is a planned expansion currently underway, and growth flow within the Waterdown Dundas flows to the Dundas plant, showing that there are some historical studies and recent recommendations for upgrades for condition and effluent quality improvements. On the conveyance side, there are significant intensification growth within the downtown core, similar to the water system, with some combined sewers having capacity constraints during wet weather events. Item number 4, or call out 4, the Centennial Trunk Sewer construction was completed to service growth on Hamilton Mountain, but downstream trunk sewer twinning of the Battlefield sewer may be reviewed or may be required due to growth on the upper mountain or the upper mountain throughout this master plan. Item 5, the Dickinson Trunk Sewer between Upper James and Centennial Parkway was planned to serve as growth within the Airport Employment Growth District, or AEGD, as well as the Hamilton Mountain growth areas. Also identified and during preliminary opportunities and constraints is the Western Sanitary Interceptor Sewer, the WSI, which showing potential future capacity constraints under existing and growth scenarios. Under combined sewer overflows, item number 7 throughout the city is that the city and the master plan is endeavoring to gain compliance with the MECP's F55 requirements for combined sewer overflows, which is a constraint, and we're trying to manage that through the master plan recommendations. We can move on, please. Next slide. The existing stormwater system, similarly, as shown, existing figure showing the existing stormwater system. And in predominantly, this master plan is focusing on a separated sewer area where the stormwater is conveyed by two main systems. The minor system, which is a system designed to convey the flows for frequent storms, typically an underground storm sewer network. And the city of Hamilton has a requirement for a 1 in 5 year return period design event in order to convey that flow. The major system, which is the overland flow, typically along the road network, which is conveying flows in excess of the typical storm sewer or minor system capacity. Minor system conveys water to existing open water courses or creeks, into storm water management facilities, sometimes dry ponds or wet ponds, which provide that peak flow control, as well as stormwater quality treatment prior to discharge. And in older areas of the storm sewer network, there are typically no stormwater management facilities, and that's something else we will identify as part of our opportunities constraints. The major system under this master plan is going to be reviewed to identify some overland flow pathways, as well as capacity of the system in terms of ponding and flooding potentially of other areas. Move on, next slide, please. Existing constraints and opportunities on the stormwater system. There are several different opportunities constraints within the system. We have many of them listed. Now, the list for the stormwater system, similarly to the water and wastewater, should note is that this list is not exhaustive, that there are other constraints that are potentially located within the system. We haven't listed every single one, but we are hitting on some of the key ones here. In terms of storm sewer capacity, there are several areas of concern in terms of a pure capacity in the King Coots, Meadowlands area, Fessenden and Mountain View neighborhoods, the Garth Street Trunk Sewer, Hester and Hayden Branch, Upper James, and the Stony Creek area, all identified by their numbers. Stormwater quality control. So there are areas that are lacking stormwater quality treatment in Westdale, Upper James and Shadoke, Lower Stony Creek, and then in some areas of Hamilton Mountain. In terms of pond retrofit opportunities that we've identified is in Ancaster, in the Meadowlands, and in Glanbrook. Green infrastructure and low impact development is always a typical master plan endeavor or objective, and specific stormwater management criteria for the airport lands and some of the greenfield growth areas. Focusing on LIDs is part of the master plan opportunities. The city also does have policy directions and opportunities that promote LID, and that is something that we've identified and that we will be showing under our planned master planning policies. Next slide, please. What we're showing here is this figure. The simplified figure is the timeline and next steps for the study. The project was identified for commencement. The notice of commencement went out spring 2023, and here we are in PIC 1. Throughout the summer and spring of 2023, we are going to be developing the alternative servicing solutions and strategies for the water, wastewater, stormwater systems, assessing and evaluating into the fall, coming into the another public information center to identify and to show the preliminary preferred strategies, followed by filing and having a final master plan report sometime summer of 2024. Next slide, please. How to get involved, as identified at the outset, we do want to get the public involved, and we do want your input. So today we can provide input on the master planning process and the study considerations as well. In future PIC2, we'll have opportunity to have input on the evaluation selection of the preferred alternatives. Ideally, we can have there are many different ways that you can let us know your thoughts on the right side. So emailing the project team, signing up for updates with comment response form, and then attending PIC2. So we'd appreciate feedback by May 23rd, but we are open to feedback anytime throughout the process. Thanks very much. Pass it back to Omar.
Thank you, Mark, for informative presentation. I'm sure that a lot of us in attendance today appreciated the details and the amount of work that you're undertaking as part of this study. And there are many questions that might have been generated in the participants' minds. So rest assured, we will get to all those questions at the end of this session during the live Q&A session, and you can share those, and Mark and the team will address them when the time comes. So with that, our next presentation is on the Strategic Transportation Network Review Study. David Powell from Arcadis IBI Group will introduce us to the study, the outcomes of the study, and how you, as members of the public and stakeholders interested in this Strategic Transportation Network Review, can provide feedback. So with that, I will pass it to David. David, you can introduce yourself and walk us through your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Omar. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Powell. I'm a transportation planner with Arcadis IBI Group, and I'm here tonight to be presenting our slides on the Strategic Transportation Network Review. So to start off, what is the Strategic Transportation Network Review? The City of Hamilton initiated the study, the Strategic Transportation Network Review, also we will be referring to it as the STNR, to update its planned future transportation network. So this study will look at determining the short, medium, and long-term transportation needs to support servicing requirements out to the year 2041, with additional consideration for 2041 to 2051. The STNR will, number one, align with the 2018 Transportation Master Plan vision and desired outcomes, which are still in force today. Number two, identify projects that update the road, transit, and active transportation networks, along with relevant supporting infrastructure. And number three, include the anticipated timing and updated costs of each project. And ultimately, the STNR will provide inputs to the 2024 Development Charges Bylaw. And all of those points will be discussed in further detail in the coming slides. So to start off, why are we doing this study? As stated earlier in the presentation, Hamilton is growing incredibly fast, and with an anticipated increase of over 200,000 people and over 100,000 jobs by 2051 in comparison to 2021. So given this anticipated growth out to 2051, there will be increased travel demand as more people move around the city to live, work, play, and connect. So there's a need to provide resilient infrastructure that sustainably accommodates this increased travel demand, while also supporting economic development, as well as fostering healthy and safe communities. So it's key here that we're growing in a way that's environmentally sustainable, but also in a way that provides a strong quality of life and attractive lifestyle choices for the people living in Hamilton. And it's critical that we start the planning work today so that we're ready when 2051 comes. I mentioned on the first slide that the outputs from this study will be used in the 2024 development charges bylaw. So you might ask, what are development charges? So at a high level, to support population and employment growth, the city needs to provide new infrastructure. And in the transportation world, this means things like roads, sidewalks, multi-use paths, bike lanes, and more, within the context of complete streets, trying to prioritize all users of the road. So development charges are fees that developers pay when a building permit is issued to help pay for municipal services to new developments, including the transportation infrastructure that I just mentioned. In the absence of development charges, the cost for additional infrastructure will need to be funded in other ways, and this could be at the expense of existing residents and businesses in the form of things like higher property taxes and higher user fees. So ultimately, development charges can ease the financial burden on taxpayers while still supporting new services as a result of growth. If you have further questions about development charges, there is more information online on the City of Hamilton website, and we'll talk about sources for more information at the end of the presentation. To give a quick overview of our study process, we kicked off this project last fall with a policy review and also developing our project list. So the policy review is looking at the existing context in Hamilton. Meanwhile, the project list is looking at synthesizing information from various sources into a long list of potential projects. We continued that synthesizing work and coming up to our long list into the winter of this year, and we also began to develop our evaluation framework. So this evaluation framework is intended to determine whether the projects that we've identified in our potential long list align with Hamilton's transportation goals and desired outcomes. We're here today at PIC number 1, and we're looking to hear from you on feedback on our list of potential transportation projects. We'll take that feedback and then we'll move on to the evaluating and costing projects phase in the spring and summer. So ultimately, this will be conducting the evaluation process on that long list of potential projects to come out to a final list. And in that final list, we'll also include the cost and the anticipated timing of these projects. We'll come back and have another conversation at PIC, or Public Information Center number 2, this fall. And ultimately, then once we consider that feedback, ultimately the final transportation inputs will be obtained, and these will go into the development charges background study this fall, and ultimately into the 2024 development charges bylaw. It's important here to set our policy context to understand the environment that we're operating in. So the 2018 Transportation Master Plan, also known as TMP, is a key policy document in the City of Hamilton that outlines a vision, desired outcomes, and a future transportation network for the city. This includes an evaluation of future transportation systems, which fulfills phases 1 and 2 of the environmental assessment process, as Mark previously discussed in the earlier slides. So the TMP desired outcomes are a sustainable and balanced transportation system, a healthy and safe communities, and economic prosperity and growth. While the overall vision is to provide a comprehensive and attainable transportation blueprint for Hamilton as a whole that balances all modes of transportation to become a healthier city. The success of this plan will be based on specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and programmable results. And as I noted earlier, it's key to note that 2018 TMP is still in force. The city has identified a long list of potential future transportation projects from a wide range of sources, including this TMP and Grids 2. The TMP is still in effect, and the STNR follows the vision and desired outcomes of the 2018 TMP that I just shared with you. The STNR will then evaluate this long list of potential future transportation projects using evaluation criteria based on the 2018 TMP. So projects that pass the evaluation process will be costed and then included in the 2024 development charges bylaw. So you can really see here how the 2018 TMP is really the foundation and guiding our overall study. So let's talk about Hamilton today. So Hamilton's transportation network includes many different modes, spanning roads, active transportation, also called AT, which covers walking and cycling, and also transit. And as you can see in the map on the right, we have the City of Hamilton's road network within the municipal boundary. So here we have a slide talking about the potential future transportation network. So if we look at the map on the right, it includes a range of different projects. So we have the LRT, which is a confirmed transit network, but shown for context. We have the potential BLAST rapid transit network. And then we also have potential road projects, orange for new roads, dark blue for road reconstruction, and that green teal color for road widenings. As I mentioned earlier, this long list shown on the map here is drawn from a variety of sources. So the previous development charges background study, the transportation master plan, various secondary plans, and also the infrastructure needs assessment conducted by the city to support future growth and the urban boundary expansion. So it should be noted that active transportation projects, while not shown on the map, can be viewed online in the City of Hamilton Cycling Master Plan. So a couple of things to note here. The dashed black areas are the expanded urban boundary that was briefly discussed earlier. And you can see that many of the projects are concentrated in the southern and northeastern areas. So these are key growth areas, including the Airport Employment District and also the industrial lands in the northeast. You can also see that most of the new roads and the road widening projects are concentrated in, again, the south and east, but particularly in some of the expanded urban boundaries. And really the point of this is we're, again, protecting and preparing for future residential and employment areas. We see projects to support transit along the BLAST network and also the road reconstruction work along the future LRT corridor. We see the complete streets approach in Hamilton as key, where we're trying to prioritize the needs of all road users. So road widenings, as well as new roads, are really minimal within the core urban areas. And as previously noted in the presentation, in that planning section in the beginning, the projects in the urban boundary expansion areas will only come online once development is open in those areas. And there are secondary plans and neighborhood plans that are completed for those areas. So while we don't touch those plans in our study in this presentation, the City of Hamilton is certainly conducting that work concurrently and in tandem. So to describe the list of potential transportation projects a bit further, it spans roads, transit, active transportation, as well as additional programs. So the road improvements are intended to serve as newly developed areas and promote sustainable travel along complete streets. Examples include Airport Road widening, Arvin Avenue extension, a new road, reconstruction on Main Street, and North Waterdown Drive. On the transit side, it's intended to serve new development and support growing transit ridership throughout the city. So we think about rapid transit routes, transit priority measures such as transit signal priority, new buses, new support vehicles, bus stop upgrades, terminal end-of-line improvements and expansions. On the active transportation side, we see pedestrian and cycling improvements to support active transportation throughout the city and also to connect to our new growth areas. So things like new bike lanes, new multi-use paths, new sidewalks, pedestrian crossovers and pedestrian bridges. And finally, for additional programs, these are additional infrastructure projects that support the overall network, spanning roads, transit, and AT, active transportation, that I just explained. So examples could include intersection improvements, street lighting upgrades, traffic management programs, grade separation projects across rail tracks. So our potential long list is quite extensive, as you can imagine, and you can view the long list on our project website on the Engage Hamilton website. The link is down below. So moving on now to our evaluation project, or evaluation process, I should say. So the 2018 TMP, our guiding source, evaluated alternative transportation solutions using 5 evaluation criteria categories. And these 5 evaluation criteria categories are also used here in the TMP, or in the STNR rather, to evaluate the long list of potential projects in our STNR. So the 5 categories being transportation, environment, social, economic, and implementation. So on the transportation side, we're looking at future volumes in terms of vehicles on the road, and also future transit ridership. Equity and accessibility are also really key. So looking at how the projects serve marginalized communities when we think about aging population, visible minorities, low-income groups, and also Indigenous peoples. On the environment side, we're looking at the proximity of the projects to environmentally sensitive areas as a part of the city's climate change mitigation strategy. We know how critical these natural areas are, and we're aimed at protecting these spaces when we're introducing these new infrastructure projects. On the social side, we're looking at supporting active lifestyles and reducing dependency on single occupancy vehicles through active transportation, but also transit as well. Connection to institutions is really key. So things like schools, places of worship, community centers. On the economic side, we're looking at future truck volumes. We know how critical goods movement is to overall economic growth. And we're also looking at connection to commercial and employment areas. And this includes ports, airports, and rail yards. On the implementation side, we're looking at the ease of implementation. So certainly a project crossing a river or a valley or a large water body is more difficult to implement than a project that doesn't, for example. And we're also trying to look at cost effectiveness in terms of the anticipated future travel volumes, whether it's vehicles transit, in comparison to the costs of some of these projects. And these criteria are currently being finalized. So moving on now to our next steps. Number one, we'll take the feedback from today and we'll move into evaluating our long list of potential future transportation projects to determine which projects should be carried forward into our final list. After this, we'll update the project costs and determine the timing of each of those projects on our final list. We'll come back and have another conversation where we present the final list of projects at Public Information Center number 2 this fall. We'll collect feedback, and then ultimately the transportation inputs will be finalized and then will feed into the 2024 Development Charges Bylaw. So we want to hear from you. So there are various ways on the screen for you to share your feedback through email, through the feedback or the comment box, and by phone as well. We do ask that, if possible, you provide the feedback by May 25th so that we can continue to advance our work into the subsequent phases of the project. And that's it on the transportation side. So I'll pass it back now to Omar to facilitate a question and answer session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, David, for the informative presentation. I'm sure that everyone in here appreciate the amount of work that you have been doing, helping the city to identify those projects by applying the climate change, and not just yourself, but water, wastewater, and stormwater master plan, by applying the equity lens and the stormwater, the climate change lenses, and as part of your evaluation, in order to align your objectives and the process with cities, the overall city's goals and objectives, and at the end, aligning with our collective citywide vision, just to be the best place to raise a child and age successfully. So I thank you both for the presentations.